Well, hopefully you found that amusing. And, the idea that suddenly a birth control method that a lot of women relied on was taken off the market was actually a pretty legitimate concern, right? If you have become accustomed to using a particular birth control method, it can be really jarring to have to try and figure something else out. So the effectiveness of the sponge, again, it depends on whether the person's had a baby or not. And it is actually a little bit better. It was a little bit better in actual use among women who have never had a baby than the cervical cap it was or is. And theoretically, and actual use after women have had babies, it's a little bit better than cervical cap. Advantages, same as the cervical cap. It was easy to buy at the time it was sold at the grocery store, things like that. But the disadvantages, all the same as the cervical cap, and all the same risks as spermicide because it has that embedded in it. And it had that additional problem, which meant that you had to have access to water. And so for, spontaneous evenings out at the beach or something like that, you might not have had water with you. Nowadays, that might not be as big of an issue because everybody has bottled water with them. But back in the day when the sponge was on the market, it was actually an issue. And some women reported higher rates of urinary tract infections when they were using the sponge. And one theory was that the sponge actually, is kind of bulky. And so that could cause, some pressure on the bladder or on the urethra that normally wouldn't happen if you didn't have that extra thickness in the vagina. Other people have argued that maybe some of the bacteria that, was in this inhygienic sponge was going into the urethra. So there's, different explanations for why the higher risk of urinary tract infections. So yeah, it definitely has these problems. So it came off the market, unfortunately. You can see where the concept was really a good idea, but it's not on the market anymore. All right, well, let's transition into intrauterine methods. So these are methods where something is going to be inserted into, inside of the opening that is inside the uterus. We call that, just for an easier phrase, we call them IUDs, intrauterine devices. So here's a picture of Paragard in place. And so what you see is that it's T-shaped, it's inserted into the uterus and occupies that space. And you can see that there's strings that are extending out of the cervix and would be, palpable, we call it, if you can feel it with touch. You can feel those strings in the vagina. Paragard is a really long-lasting IUD. It's good for up to 12 years. It contains copper, and copper is thought to interfere with ovulation and disrupt sperm. And it just seems to be altogether interfering with all the things that are going on. Skyla is a smaller version. So you see Paragard is occupying most of the uterus. Skyla would be a lot smaller inside that uterus. It's embedded with progestin. So throughout the 3 years that it's in the uterus, it's secreting progestin so that it's chemically, hormonally preventing ovulation. And it's also contributing to thickening of the cervical mucus. And then Mirena is one that lasts 5 years. It's impregnated with enough progestin to last up to 5 years. So these are just a few of the brand name IUDs that are on the market, some really common ones. You'll notice they're all basically shaped like T's. For insertion purposes, those T's tilt so that it becomes rod-shaped for insertion, and then it sort of springs into this T shape one way or another. So I'm going to let this... Okay, now this video, this is, I think it's called How Stuff Works or something like that. She's trying to be kind of funny, so be prepared that she's trying to use humor throughout part of it. But you'll notice a part that I'm going to have to react to when we come back. So I will talk about the part where she slows down and says it twice. I have some things I'd like to say about that when we come back. So I will see you after that.